This $15,000 Vera Wang gown hugs my body, yet I feel cheaper than a clearance item in my father's eyes. With a two-line text, he chose my selfish sister's fake launch party over my life's biggest moment. But he does not know tonight is actually a public trial. The proof of his betrayal sits in the groom's pocket, and when the velvet curtain rises, there is no escape for the man who picked the wrong side. My name is Carmen Solano, and for the last hour, I have been staring at a stranger in the mirror of the bridal suite at the Drake Hotel. The woman looking back at me is perfection personified, a vision crafted by a team of 3 stylists who have spent the better part of the afternoon sculpting my hair into glossy waves and painting my face with a palette of champagne and soft rose. The room smells of expensive hairspray and the 3 dozen white calla lilies that Alexander sent up explicitly to calm my nerves. Outside the window, the wind whips off Lake Michigan, battering the glass of the high-rise, but inside, everything is temperature-controlled, soft-lit, and terrifyingly serene. I smooth my hands over the silk bodice of the gown. It was a masterpiece of structure and lace, a garment that cost $15,000 and required 3 fittings to ensure it hugged my waist like a second skin. This was supposed to be the armor I wore to step into my new life. I took a deep breath, trying to steady the frantic rhythm of my heart. Everything was on schedule. The ceremony was set to begin in 45 minutes. The photographer was waiting in the lobby. My life, for once, felt like it was following a script that did not involve screaming matches or slammed doors. Then, the phone sitting on the marble vanity buzzed. It was a single, short vibration, barely audible over the soft jazz playing from the room's speakers, but it sounded like a gunshot to my hypersensitive ears. I reached for it, my manicured nails clicking against the screen illuminated with a message from Dad. My stomach tightened. I told myself it was just a check-in. Maybe he was asking if I needed anything. Maybe he was already downstairs, having a drink at the Coq d'Or, waiting for the cue to come up and see his daughter. I unlocked the phone. The text message was 2 lines long. I am sorry, Carmen. Bianca's event has had a major PR malfunction. I have to go there to reassure the investors for her. I will try to make it to the reception. I read it once. Then I read it again. The words did not make sense. They floated on the screen, detached from reality. Bianca's event, PR malfunction, investors. My brain tried to process the logistics. Bianca, my younger sister, was launching a virtual fashion collection for her brand, Solano Chic. Today, it was a vanity project, funded entirely by my father's law firm earnings. A digital pop-up that required 0 physical presence. How could there be a PR malfunction so catastrophic that it required Matteo Solano, a 60-year-old corporate lawyer, to abandon his eldest daughter on her wedding day? He was not coming. The realization hit me not like a wave, but like a physical blow to the chest. The air in the room suddenly felt thin, insufficient to fill my lungs. "Carmen, you okay, hon?" The voice belonged to Sarah, one of my bridesmaids and a senior analyst at Nebula Horizons, the media conglomerate where we both worked. She was standing by the window, adjusting the strap of her dusty blue dress. She must have seen my expression change in the mirror. I could not answer her. My mind was violently yanked back to 3 months ago. I was sitting across from my father at Cielo, one of the best Italian restaurants in the city. The waiter had just poured us a vintage Barolo. I had asked him, point blank, to check his calendar. I told him that Alexander's family, the Sterlings, were sticklers for tradition. The wedding was going to be a massive affair, broadcast in the social pages. I needed him to be there. I needed him to be a father. I remembered the way he swirled the red wine in his glass, looking me dead in the eye with that charming, lawyerly confidence that had won him so many cases. "Carmen," he had said, his voice dripping with sincerity, "do not insult me. You are my firstborn. Nothing in this world, not a trial, not a client, not a natural disaster, will stop me from walking you down that aisle. It is the proudest duty of my life." He had reached across the table and squeezed my hand. His grip had felt firm, Honest.
Liar.
The words screamed in my head.
Liar, liar, liar.
He had chosen her again, just like he always did. My hand, holding a half-full glass of Pinot Noir that I had been nursing for calmness, began to tremble. The tremors started in my fingers and shot up my arm. I tried to set the glass down on the vanity, but my depth perception failed me. The stem of the glass hit the edge of the marble counter. Crash. The sound was sharp and violent, cutting through the jazz music. The crystal shattered, sending shards flying across the plush cream carpet. The dark red wine splashed outward, a jagged pool of blood-colored liquid spreading dangerously close to the hem of my pristine white dress. "Oh my God!" Jessica, my other bridesmaid and the marketing director at Nebula Horizons, gasped, dropping her clutch. I stood frozen. I did not look at the mess. I did not look at my friends rushing over with towels, their voices rising in a panic as they checked my skirt for stains. Miraculously, the wine had missed the silk by less than 2 inches, but I could not feel the relief. I could not feel anything but the cold, hollow ache in the center of my chest where my heart used to be. It was happening again. The pattern was repeating itself, precise as a clock. For 26 years, this had been the dynamic. Bianca was the fragile porcelain doll, the princess who needed constant saving. If Bianca had a cold, the world stopped. If Bianca failed a math test, it was the teacher's fault. If Bianca wanted to start a business, Dad drained his savings, and I was Carmen, the sturdy one, the rock, the one who did not need help, the one who could handle it. "You are so strong. Carmen," he would say, usually right before he canceled plans with me to go rescue Bianca from some self-inflicted disaster. "You understand, right? Your sister needs me." I remembered my college graduation. I was valedictorian. I stood on that podium, scanning the crowd for his face. He was not there. Bianca had called him that morning, claiming she had appendicitis. He had rushed to her dorm, only to find out it was just bad cramps from eating too much spicy food. But by the time he found out, my name had already been called. I walked off that stage with a diploma in one hand and a cell phone in the other. Listening to his voicemail apology, I forgave him then. I forgave him when he missed my 30th birthday because Bianca had a breakup. I forgave him 1,000 times. But this was the wedding. This was the one day where the hierarchy was supposed to shift. This was the one day I was supposed to be the priority. "Carmen, talk to us," Sarah said, her voice gentle but urgent. She was on her knees, dabbing at the wine stain on the rug. "Did something happen? Is it Alexander?" "No," I whispered. My voice sounded raspy, foreign. "It is not Alexander." I looked at the phone again. "I will try to make the reception." Try. He was not even promising to come later. He was giving himself an out. He was already calculating the odds that Bianca's drama would take all night. The door to the suite opened with a soft click. The atmosphere in the room shifted immediately. It became heavier, more formal. Elena Sterling walked in. My stepmother-in-law was a woman who commanded attention without ever raising her voice. She was the epitome of old-money elegance, a woman who wore Saint John knits and pearls as casual wear, whose hair was a perfect silver bob that never moved, and whose eyes missed absolutely nothing. She had married Alexander's father 15 years ago and had run the Sterling family's social calendar with the precision of a military general ever since. She stopped in the entryway, her gaze sweeping over the scene. She saw the bridesmaids hovering nervously. She saw the shattered glass on the floor. She saw the red stain on the carpet. And finally, she looked at me. Elena did not panic. Women like Elena Sterling did not panic. They assessed. "Everyone out," she said. Her tone was polite, but it was not a request. "Give us 5 minutes, please." Sarah and Jessica hesitated, looking at me for confirmation. I gave a stiff nod. They grabbed their purses and slipped out the door, closing it softly behind them. Now it was just Elena and me. The silence was deafening. Elena walked over to the vanity, sidestepping the broken glass with practiced grace. She placed her hand on my shoulder. Her skin was cool, her touch firm. "Carmen," she said, "you look beautiful, but you are shaking." I bit my lip, tasting the metallic tang of fear. I could not lie to her. I could not lie to this woman who valued truth and decorum above all else. The Sterlings were not just rich. They were an institution in Chicago. They believed in showing up. They believed in honor. If you said you would be somewhere, you were there, even if you were dying. "He is not coming," I said. The words tore out of my throat, painful and jagged. Elena's eyebrows lifted a fraction of an inch. "Who?" "My father," I choked out. Tears began to well up in my eyes, threatening to ruin the makeup artist's work. "He sent a text. Just now. Bianca. Something happened with her launch. He went to her." I waited for the judgment. I waited for her to look at me with pity or, worse, disdain. I was marrying into a dynasty, and my own father could not be bothered to show up because his other daughter had a temper tantrum on the internet. It was trashy. It was low class. It confirmed every insecurity I had about not belonging in Alexander's world. I felt naked in my $15,000 dress. I felt like the fraud that Bianca always said I was. "He chose a fashion launch over walking you down the aisle?" Elena asked. Her voice was dangerously calm. "He said there was a problem with investors." I defended him instinctively, a habit ingrained in me since childhood. "He said he had to fix it." "On your wedding day," Elena repeated. She was not asking a question. She was stating a fact so absurd it sounded like a joke. I looked down at my hands. "I am sorry, Elena. I know how this looks. I know how important the procession is to the family. I can walk by myself. Or maybe I can ask." I stopped. Ask who I had no brothers. My mother passed away when I was 10. My uncle Julian had been exiled from the family years ago. I had no one. "I am so humiliated," I whispered, the tears finally spilling over. "I am so sorry." Elena reached into her clutch and pulled out a pristine linen handkerchief. She dabbed my eyes carefully, ensuring she did not smudge the mascara. "Carmen, look at me." I raised my eyes to meet hers. Her expression was steel. "You have nothing to apologize for," she said, her voice hard. "The shame is not yours to carry. It belongs entirely to him." She took the phone from my hand, read the message, and then placed the device face down on the marble counter with a definitive clack. "However," she continued, "we have a problem. The guests are seated themselves. The string quartet is playing. We have 300 of the most influential people in Illinois waiting downstairs. We need a solution, and we need it now." "I will go alone," I said, trying to summon the strength I was famous for. "I am the strong one. I have always been the strong one." Elena looked at me with a strange expression. It was not a pity. It was something closer to recognition. "Being strong does not mean you have to walk through fire alone. Carmen," she said softly, "Alexander is furious. He is outside the door right now. He wanted to come in, but I told him to wait. He wants to call your father and tear him apart." "No," I said quickly. "No drama. Please, not today." "Agreed." Elena nodded. "No drama, only dignity." She stepped back and looked at the broken glass on the floor. "You know," she mused, "in some cultures, breaking glass at a wedding is good luck. It means the old life is shattered, and the new one begins." I looked at the shards. They glittered under the chandelier light, sharp, dangerous, and broken beyond repair, just like my relationship with my father. "He promised me," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "At dinner, 3 months ago, he promised." "And he broke it," Elena said. "Now, dry your face, fix your lipstick. You are a Solano by birth, but in 40 minutes, you will be a Sterling, and Sterlings do not let the world see them bleed." She turned to leave, pausing at the door. "I will handle the announcement to the planner. We will adjust the procession order. Take 5 minutes. Scream if you have to, then put your mask back on." The door clicked shut. I was alone again. I looked back at the mirror. The perfect bride was gone. In her place was a woman with eyes that had suddenly turned very old. I picked up the phone one last time. I looked at the text. "I will try to make the reception." I typed a reply. My fingers are steady now. "Do not bother." I stared at the words, 2 words, just like his. I hovered my thumb over the send button, but I did not press it, not yet. Instead, I deleted the draft. Silence was a louder message. I looked at the broken wine glass. The deep red stain on the cream carpet looked like a wound. My father thought this was just another scheduling conflict. He thought he could smooth this over with a check or a gift later, just like he always did. He thought I would understand. He thought I would be the good soldier, the reliable daughter, the one who swallowed her hurt to keep the peace. But as I looked at my reflection, I realized something. The Carmen who always understood, the Carmen who always forgave. She had just died in this room, and the woman staring back at me. She was ready to burn the whole world down, starting with the man who had just left her at the altar. I turned away from the mirror and walked toward the window, looking down at the bustling streets of Chicago. Somewhere out there, my sister was laughing, thinking she had won. Somewhere out there, my father was soothing her ego, thinking he had managed the crisis. They had no idea. The crisis was not at the launch party. The crisis was right here, in Suite 405. And unlike Bianca's fake PR disaster, this one was going to be very, very real. The silence in the bridal suite was no longer peaceful. It was suffocating. It felt heavy, like the air before a tornado touches down, charged with an electricity that made the fine hairs on my arms stand up. I sat on the edge of the velvet chaise lounge, the phone still clutched in my hand like a weapon I was afraid to use. My mind, seeking an escape from the humiliating present, drifted back to the beginning of the end. It always went back to the day my mother died. I was 10 years old. Bianca was 6. When the doctors told us she was gone, my father had collapsed, not into the role of the grieving protector, but into a puddle of sheer helplessness. He had looked at us, 2 little girls in black dresses, with a terror that I did not understand then. But I understood perfectly now. He was afraid of being the bad guy. He was afraid of our pain. Bianca had sensed that fear like a shark senses blood in the water. She realized that if she cried loud enough, if she hyperventilated, if she threw herself onto the floor, Dad would do anything to make it stop. He would buy her ponies. He would fire nannies. He would rewrite reality just to silence her sobbing. I, on the other hand, had retreated. I had tried to be like Mom, stoic, composed, reliable. I thought that by making myself easy, I was helping him. I was wrong. By making myself easy, I made myself invisible. I closed my eyes, and the memory of my college graduation played behind my eyelids in high definition. It was the first time I truly understood my place in the Solano hierarchy. I graduated summa cum laude. I had wanted, more than anything, for my father to see me walk across that stage. But the morning of the ceremony, Bianca had called him, screaming in agony. She claimed her appendix was bursting. Dad had left me a voicemail, his voice panic-stricken, saying he had to rush her to the ER. I spent my graduation day alone, holding my diploma, worrying about my little sister. When I finally got to the hospital that evening, ready to donate blood or sit by her bedside, I found them in the cafeteria. Bianca was eating a cheeseburger. The doctors had found nothing. It was phantom pain, she said, just gas, or maybe stress. But as she sat there, swinging her legs and dipping fries into ketchup, I saw a flicker of a smile when she looked at me. It was not a relief. It was a victory. She had stolen my day. And Dad was just so relieved she was not dying that he forgot to be angry. He forgot to apologize to me. And now, history was repeating itself, but the stakes were infinitely higher. I looked at the phone again. The text message was not enough. I needed to hear his voice. I needed to hear him say the words. I needed to hear the lie so I could finally execute the hope that had been rotting inside me for 26 years. My fingers trembled as I dialed his number. It rang once, twice. "Carmen, I cannot talk right now." His voice came through the speaker. It was breathless, rushed. "You are not coming," I said. It was not a question. "I told you in the text," he said, his voice rising in defensive irritation. "It is a disaster here. The press got wind of a rumor about the sourcing of the fabrics for Solano Chic. They are calling it a scam. They are threatening to destroy Bianca's reputation before the brand even launches. I have to be here. I am the legal counsel. If I do not handle the statement, they will eat her alive." "The launch is virtual." "Dad," I said, my voice eerily calm, "there is no physical press. You are a corporate lawyer, not a PR crisis manager. You could handle this over the phone from the church vestry." "You do not understand," he snapped. "She is hysterical. She is threatening to hurt herself. Carmen, she says her life is over. What kind of father would I be if I left her alone in this state?" "And what kind of father are you to leave me alone at the altar?" I asked. There was a pause. For a second, I thought I had reached him. I thought maybe, just maybe, the shame would kick in. Then I heard it. In the background, behind his heavy breathing, there was a sound. It was distinct, a heavy, rhythmic thumping, bass, the kind of deep, vibrating beat you hear at a nightclub or a high-end lounge, and over the music, the clink of glassware. "You are at a party," I whispered. It is the background noise from the anxiety," he stammered, his lie collapsing into absurdity. "I am at her apartment. She has the TV on loud to drown out the thoughts. I hear people, Dad. I hear laughter." "You are hearing things because you are upset," he said, his tone shifting from defensive to accusatory. "Stop being so selfish. Carmen, this is typical of you, always making it about yourself. Your sister is in crisis, and you are worried about a ceremony. You have Alexander. You have the money. You have everything. Bianca has nothing but this brand. Why can you not have a single ounce of compassion for your own blood?" Selfish. The word hung in the air between Chicago and wherever he was. I had spent my entire life shrinking myself so Bianca could expand. I had given up my college fund so she could go to art school in Paris, which she quit after 2 months. I had given up my mother's jewelry because Bianca cried that she had nothing pretty to wear to prom. I had given up my father. "I hear her," I said. "What?" "I hear her laughing." And I did. Cutting through the bass and the murmuring crowd, I heard that high-pitched, tinkling giggle. It was the same laugh she had given me in the hospital cafeteria over her cheeseburger. She is crying." My father lied, but his voice wavered. "She is hysterical." "Goodbye, Dad," I said. "Carmen, wait, do not be dramatic. I will try to—" I tapped the red icon. The call ended. The silence rushed back in. But this time, it was not empty. It was filled with the cold, hard clarity of truth. The door to the suite burst open. I jumped, spinning around. It was Alexander. He stood in the doorway, chest heaving, his face a mask of fury that I had never seen before. He was still in his tuxedo trousers and white shirt, but his tie was undone, hanging loosely around his neck, and his jacket was missing. He had broken the cardinal rule. He was seeing the bride before the ceremony. "Is it true?" he demanded. His voice was low, dangerous. He walked into the room, kicking the door shut behind him with his heel. He did not look at the dress. He did not look at my hair. He looked straight into my eyes, searching for the damage. "Elena told me," he said, crossing the room in 3 long strides. He stopped just inches from me, his hands hovering as if he wanted to grab me but was afraid I might shatter. "She told me he is not here. She told me he bailed." I nodded. I could not trust my voice. "That son of a bitch," Alexander hissed. He spun away from me, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair, messing it up. "I am going to kill him. I swear to God. Carmen, I am going to destroy him. Give me his number. I do not care if he is my father-in-law. I will send security to drag him here by his neck." He reached for his pocket, pulling out his phone. "Where is he? Is he with Bianca?" "I bet he is with Bianca. I will have the police raid the place for a drug search. I will have his bar license revoked. I will. Alexander, I said. He did not stop. He thinks he can disrespect you. He thinks he can disrespect the Sterling family. He is a small-time lawyer playing games with the big dogs. I will bury him under so many lawsuits he will not be able to afford a bus ticket. Alexander, I shouted. He froze. He turned back to me, his chest rising and falling rapidly. The rage in his eyes softened as he looked at me, replaced by a profound, aching sadness. He hurt you, he said softly. He promised me. Carmen, man to man. He looked me in the eye and promised he would take care of you today. I know, I said. I walked over to him. I reached out and took his hand. His knuckles were white. But you cannot call him. Why, he demanded. He deserves to hear what a coward he is. Because he does not care, I said. The words tasted like ash, but they were the truth. If you call him, he will just make himself the victim. He will say, I am ungrateful. He will say, we are bullying him. He will twist it until he is the martyr and I am the villain. I have played this game for 26 years. Alex, you cannot win against a narcissist by fighting him. You only win by refusing to play. Alexander looked down at me. He raised his hand and gently touched my cheek, his thumb brushing away a tear I did not even know had fallen. I am so sorry, he whispered. You deserve better. You deserve a father who looks at you the way I look at you. I have realized something, I said, leaning into his touch. I have been waiting for him to choose me my whole life. I thought if I was smart enough, successful enough, pretty enough, or kind enough, he would finally see me. I thought if I married the CEO of Sterling Dynamics, he would finally respect me. I let out a shaky breath. But it was never about me. It was never about what I did or did not do. He is just broken, and he loves her brokenness because it makes him feel useful. He cannot love me because I do not need him to save me. Alexander pulled me into a hug. I buried my face in his chest, smelling his cologne sandalwood and expensive scotch. He felt solid, real, unlike the ghost I had been chasing. So what do we do? Alexander asked into my hair. I cannot let you walk down that aisle alone. Carmen, it will break my heart. Let me walk with you. We will rewrite the tradition. We will go together. I pulled back, looking up at him. It was a tempting offer. It would be romantic. It would be a statement of partnership. But then I thought about the 300 guests downstairs. I thought about the whispers. I thought about the pity. If I walked with Alexander, they would say, oh, poor thing. Her daddy didn't show, so her husband had to rescue her. It would still be a story about my lack. It would still be a story about a woman who needed a man to hold her up. No, I said. My voice is steady now. I do not want to be rescued. Alex, not by him, and not by you. Carmen? I am going to walk alone, I said. They will stare, he warned. My aunts, the business partners, they are sharks. They will smell blood. Let them stare, I said. I straightened my spine, feeling the steel rod of determination lock into place. Let them see. I would rather have their pity than their false politeness. I would rather walk alone with my head high than beg for a scrap of affection from a man who would trade me for a text message. I stepped back from him. Go back to the altar. Alexander, fix your tie. Put your jacket back on. Wait for me. Are you sure? He asked, searching my face. I have never been more sure of anything, I said. He thinks he can ruin this day. He thinks his absence will break me. He is wrong. His absence just set me free. Alexander looked at me for a long moment. Then, a slow smile spread across his face. It was a smile of pure admiration. God, I love you, he said. He leaned in and kissed me hard, desperate and full of promise. Then he turned and walked to the door. He paused with his hand on the handle. I will be waiting, he said. And when you get to the end of that aisle, I promise you, I am never letting you go. He left. I was alone again, but the room felt different now. The air was no longer suffocating. It was clear. I walked back to the mirror. I looked at the woman in the reflection. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but dry. Her chin was lifted. My father was not coming. Bianca was laughing at me. The world was ready to judge me. Good, I thought, let them watch. I was done being the daughter who waited. Today, I was the woman who walked. I smoothed the silk of my skirt one last time, my hands brushing against the fabric with a mechanical rhythm. The silence in the room was absolute now, a stark contrast to the storm raging inside my chest. I had made my decision. I would walk alone. I would face the sharks, the gossips, and the pitying stares of the Chicago elite with my head held high. I grabbed my bouquet of white calla lilies, gripping the stems so tightly my knuckles turned white. I turned toward the door, ready to march into the fire. Knock, knock. The sound was hesitant, almost polite, unlike Alexander's furious entrance moments ago. It stopped me dead in my tracks. I said I am coming, I called out, my voice sharp. I just need a second. Carmen. The voice on the other side of the door was not Alexander's. It was deeper, raspier, and carried a timbre that sent a jolt of recognition down my spine. It was a voice I had not heard in 10 years, a voice that belonged to a ghost. My heart hammered against my ribs. Who is it? The handle turned slowly, and the door creaked open. A man stepped into the entryway. He was wearing a charcoal gray tuxedo that fit his broad shoulders perfectly, though his stance was unsure. Like a man waiting to be told to leave. His hair was salt and pepper, thicker than my father's, and his face was lined with the kind of weathering that comes from working outdoors, not sitting in air-conditioned boardrooms. Uncle Julian, I whispered, the name feeling foreign on my tongue. Julian Solano, my father's younger brother, offered me a tentative, crooked smile. It was the same smile I remembered from my childhood backyard barbecues, before the shouting matches, before the lawyers, before the exile. Hello, mija, he said softly. I stood frozen, the bouquet hanging limply in my hand. What are you doing here, Dad said. Dad said if you ever came near us again, he would have you arrested for trespassing. Julian stepped fully into the room and closed the door behind him. Mateo says a lot of things. Most of them are designed to keep his world small and controllable. He walked toward me, but stopped a respectful distance away, as if I were a frightened animal. Alexander called me. He sent a plane to Boston yesterday. Alexander, I blinked, trying to process this betrayal of protocol. But he knows the story. He knows you stole from the firm. Julian's expression didn't change, but his eyes dark brown and warm. So unlike my father's cold, calculating gaze filled with a profound sadness. Is that the story he told you? Julian asked, that I embezzled money. Bianca found the transfers. I recited the family lore automatically. She was 16. She was interning at the office. She found the accounts. You took $50,000. Julian let out a short, dry laugh, shaking his head. $50,000. That was the exact amount Bianca needed to cover up a hit-and-run accident she had with her new convertible that summer. She hit a parked car and drove off. She was terrified Mateo would take the car away. I stared at him. The memory surfaced vague and hazy. Bianca had damaged her car that summer. She told us someone had keyed it and smashed the headlight in a parking lot. She didn't find the transfers. Carmen, Julian said, his voice steady. She forged my signature on the withdrawal slips. She was a prodigy at manipulation even then. When I found out, I went to Mateo. I thought he would discipline her. Instead, he protected her. He told me that if I exposed her, he would ruin my career. He said a teenage girl's mistake shouldn't destroy her future. But apparently, destroying his brother's reputation was an acceptable price. My knees felt weak. I sank back onto the chaise lounge. It made sense. It made sickening, perfect sense. The pieces of the puzzle that had never quite fit why a man who lived simply would steal money. Why he never fought the charges in court suddenly clicked into place. My father had sacrificed his brother to save his golden child from consequences, just like he was sacrificing me today. I am an architect now. Carmen, Julian said, breaking the silence. I have my own firm in Boston. I have a good life. I did not come here to rehash the past or clear my name. I came because Alexander told me you might need someone. He reached into the inner pocket of his tuxedo jacket and pulled out a small, polished, wooden box. It looked old, the varnish worn down at the corners. He told me Matteo wasn't coming, Julian said. I expected as much. Matteo is a man who chases shinier things. He always has been. He held the box out to me. I brought this. I have been holding on to it for 8 years, waiting for a reason to give it back. I took the box. My hands were shaking. I undid the small brass latch and lifted the lid. Inside, resting on a bed of faded velvet, was a silver hairpin encrusted with small sapphires. I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth. Mom's pin, I choked out. This hairpin was legendary in my mind. My mother had worn it on her wedding day. She had worn it on the day I was born. After she died, it had vanished. Dad told me it was lost during the move to the penthouse. I had mourned it for years. A lost, tangible piece of the woman whose face was fading from my memory. It wasn't lost, Julian said, his voice hard with suppressed anger. Matteo sold it. I looked up at him, horror dawning on me. What? 8 years ago, Julian explained. Bianca's first business venture. Do you remember the organic makeup line? The one that failed in 3 months, I whispered. The one that got sued for causing allergic reactions, Julian corrected. Matteo needed cash to settle the lawsuits quietly. He didn't want to dip into his own capital. So he took your mother's jewelry box to an auction house. I have a friend who works there. He called me. He knew this pin. He knew what it meant to you. Tears blurred my vision, hot and fast. My father had sold my dead mother's heirloom to cover up yet another one of Bianca's failures. And he had lied to my face about it. He had watched me search the house for weeks, overturning drawers, crying that I had lost the last piece of her, and he had said nothing. I bought it, Julian said gently. I paid double the asking price to make sure they took it off the catalog immediately. I wanted to send it to you, but I knew Matteo would just sell it again if he saw it in the house, so I kept it, for this day. He reached out and touched the box. She would have wanted you to have it. She loved you so much. Carmen, you have her spirit. You have her spine. I broke. The dam that I had built over 26 years, the wall of I am fine and I can handle it, finally crumbled. I buried my face in my hands and sobbed. I cried for the mother I missed. I cried for the uncle I had lost to a lie. I cried for the father I never really had. Julian didn't look away. He didn't tell me to stop crying or to worry about my makeup. He sat down next to me in the lounge and put a heavy, comforting arm around my shoulders. He just held me while I wept, acting as the anchor I had been drifting without for my entire life. I am sorry, I gasped between sobs, wiping at my cheeks, realizing I was probably smearing mascara everywhere. I am a mess. The ceremony starts in 20 minutes. You are not a mess, Julian said firmly. He reached into his pocket and handed me a handkerchief, a real one, cotton and crisp. You are grieving. There is a difference. I dabbed at my eyes, taking deep, shuddering breaths. I looked at the hairpin again. It sparkled in the dim light, a beacon of truth in a room full of shadows. I was going to walk alone, I said, my voice trembling. I was going to show them I didn't need anyone. Julian stood up. He walked to the mirror and adjusted his bow tie, then turned back to me. He extended his hand, palm up. You don't need anyone, he agreed. You are strong enough to walk that aisle by yourself. Carmen, I know that. Alexander knows that. But you shouldn't have to. He looked me right in the eye, and his next words pierced straight through my heart. The man who sired you might not be your father. Carmen, biology is just an accident. But the one who protects you, the one who stands by you when the world tries to break you, that is family. He nodded at his outstretched hand. I may not have the right, after being gone for so long, but it would be the honor of my life to walk with you, not to give you away because you are not property to be given, but to stand beside you. I looked at his hand. It was a worker's hand, rougher than my father's, but steady. I looked at his face, seeing the love there that I had been starving for.
Yes, I whispered.
I stood up. Yes, Uncle Julian, please. I took his hand. His grip was firm, reassuring.
All right then,
he said, his voice thick with emotion. He cleared his throat. We have work to do. Let's fix this. He led me to the vanity. We worked together in a comfortable, frantic silence. I used a Q-tip to clean up the smudged eyeliner while he carefully removed the hairpin from the box. Turn around, he instructed. I turned my back to the mirror. I felt his hands, gentle and careful, slide the silver pin into the intricate bun the stylist had created. He secured it tight. Look, he said. I turned back to the reflection. The sapphire pin caught the light, sitting like a crown against my dark hair. It didn't just look beautiful. It felt heavy with history, with love, with protection. I felt a sudden warmth wash over me, a physical sensation, as if someone had just draped a blanket over my shoulders. My mother was here. She wasn't in the empty chair where my father should have been. She was right here, woven into my hair, brought back to me by the only man in the family who understood the meaning of loyalty. I looked at my face. The tears had cleared. My eyes were bright, fierce. The uncertainty was gone. How do I look? I asked. Julian smiled, and this time, his eyes crinkled at the corners. Like a queen who is about to reclaim her kingdom. He offered me his arm. Ready to go make some noise. I hooked my arm through his. The fabric of his tuxedo felt rough and real against my skin. Ready, I said. We walked toward the door. I didn't look back at the broken wine glass on the floor. I didn't look back at the phone with the unanswered texts. I stepped out of the suite and into the hallway, my head high, the sapphires in my hair gleaming like armor. We were going to the chapel, and for the first time all day, I wasn't just walking toward a wedding, I was walking toward a revolution. The heavy oak doors of the chapel stood before us like the gates to a fortress. Beyond them lay the Gold Coast room, transformed into a sanctuary of white hydrangeas and candlelight, filled with 300 of the most judgmental people in Chicago. I could hear the muffled swelling of the pipe organ, a deep, resonant vibration that I could feel in the soles of my satin heels. My heart was beating a frantic rhythm against my ribs, but my hand, resting in the crook of Uncle Julian's arm, was steady. Julian looked down at me. He did not say a word, but he did not have to. He gave my hand a squeeze, a firm, grounding pressure that communicated more safety than my father had provided in 26 years.
Ready, he asked softly.
Open them, I commanded the ushers. The ushers, 2 young men in impeccable liveries, pushed the massive doors outward. The transition was blinding. We stepped from the dim, hushed vestibule into a cavern of light. The afternoon sun was streaming through the high, arched windows, catching the dust motes dancing in the air and illuminating the aisle that stretched out before me like a runway of white silk. The organ music crested, a triumphant chord that signaled the arrival of the bride, and then, as the guests turned in their pews to look, the sound of the room changed. It was instantaneous. I heard the collective intake of breath. It started from the back rows and rolled forward like a physical wave. Then came the whispers. They were not the soft, admiring murmurs one expects at a wedding. They were sharp, confused, and scandalized. Who is that? Is that Julian Solano? Where is Mateo? Did something happen to her father? My God, is that the brother who went to prison? The gossip spread through the room faster than fire in dry grass. I could see heads leaning together, fans fluttering rapidly to cover mouths that were busily dissecting the scene. To the Sterling family's associates, the senators, the CEOs, the old money matriarchs, this was a breach of protocol. To the Solano side of the aisle, this was a declaration of war. I lifted my chin. I fixed my eyes on the altar. At the far end of the aisle stood Alexander. He was the only thing in the room that was in focus. Everything else, the flowers, the stained glass, the sea of faces blurred into a watercolor of colors and shapes, but Alexander was razor sharp. He stood tall and broad-shouldered, his hands clasped in front of him. When his eyes locked onto mine, I saw the tension leave his body. He saw Julian. He saw the sapphire pin in my hair. And he smiled. It was not a polite smile for the cameras. It was a fierce, proud smile. It was a look that said, "You did it. You survived." I took the first step. The music was slow, demanding a measured pace, left foot, right foot. As we walked past the first few rows, I felt the physical difference of having Julian beside me. I had walked with my father before at debutante balls, at charity galas, where he needed a prop to look like a family man. My father's hold had always been loose, distracted, as if he were constantly scanning the room for someone more important to talk to. His arm had been a prop, not a support. Julian was different. His arm was like iron. He walked with a deliberate, protective cadence, matching his stride to mine perfectly. He was not looking at the crowd. He was not looking for approval. He was scanning the perimeter. His body angled slightly toward me, shielding me from the energy of the room. It was the stance of a bodyguard, of a father figure who understood that his only job in this moment was to ensure I reached my destination safely. We passed the midway point. I risked a glance to my left, toward the pews reserved for the Solano family. The reaction was visceral. I saw my Aunt Rosa, my father's older sister and his staunchest defender. Her face was a mask of horrified indignation. She was clutching her pearl necklace as if she were being strangled. Beside her sat my cousin Marco, a man who had ridden my father's coattails into a mid-level management job he was unqualified for. He was glaring at Julian with open hostility, his mouth moving as he whispered something furiously to his wife. I could read their lips. Ungrateful. Disgrace. How dare she? They were furious. Not because my father was missing, they likely knew he was with Bianca, coddling the golden child, but because I had dared to replace him. I had dared to bring the black sheep back into the fold. In their eyes, exposing the family's fracture was a greater sin than the fracture itself. They would have preferred I walked alone, looking pathetic, rather than walk with Julian and look strong. I looked away from them. I did not care. Their judgment felt like rain on a windowpane noise, but unable to touch me. We approached the front. The air grew thinner, more charged. The Sterling family sat in the front row on the right. Elena Sterling was watching me with an unreadable expression, but as I passed her, I saw her give a nearly imperceptible nod. It was a salute. She saw the substitution. She understood the game, and she approved of the maneuver. We reached the foot of the altar. The music softened, transitioning into a gentle, waiting hum. This was the moment. The script called for the officiant to ask, "Who gives this woman?" and for the father to mumble, "I do," before taking his seat. But we were off script. Julian stopped. We stood there for a beat. The silence in the room heavy with anticipation. The guests were leaning forward, hungry for the explanation, for the drama. Alexander stepped down from the altar to meet us. He did not look at the officiant. He looked at Julian. Julian turned to me. He took my hand from his arm and held it in both of his hands. His eyes were shining with unshed tears, but his voice, when he spoke, was a baritone rumble that carried effortlessly to the back of the cathedral. He did not whisper. He did not mumble. He spoke to the room. "I entrust to you," Julian said, his voice ringing off the stone walls, "the precious gem that my brother blindly threw away." The sentence hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Gasps. This time, the sound was audible. It was a collective shock that rippled through the pews. Someone in the back dropped a hymn book, the clatter echoing loudly in the stunned silence. Julian had just publicly executed my father's reputation in a single sentence. He had called him blind. He had accused him of throwing me away. He had confirmed to everyone in this room, the elite, the press, the gossips, that Matteo Solano was not absent due to an emergency, but due to negligence. I saw Aunt Rosa's jaw drop. I saw the color drain from Cousin Marco's face. They had expected us to cover for Matteo. They had expected the family business approach, where we smiled and lied. Julian had just burned the lie to the ground. Alexander's face remained serious. but his eyes were blazing with triumph. He took my hand from Julian. "I will guard her with my life," Alexander replied, his voice equally clear. "And I will value what others could not see." It was a pact, a transfer of loyalty. Julian nodded, satisfied. He leaned in and kissed my cheek. "Be happy, mija," he whispered. Then, he turned and walked to the empty seat in the front row, the seat marked Father of the Bride, and sat down. He unbuttoned his jacket and crossed his legs, looking completely at ease, daring anyone to challenge him. No one did. Alexander led me up the 3 marble steps to the altar. We stood before the priest, a kindly old man who looked slightly bewildered by the break in tradition but recovered quickly. "Dearly beloved," he began. The ceremony that followed was a blur of emotion, but unlike the rehearsal, everything felt hyper-real. I was not floating. I was grounded. I felt the cool marble through my shoes. I smelled the beeswax candles. I felt the warmth of Alexander's hand holding mine. When it came time for the vows, we had written our own. But as I looked at Alexander, the prepared speech about loving you in sickness and in health felt insufficient. It felt too generic for the war we were fighting. I took the microphone. My hand was steady. "Alexander," I said. My voice did not shake. "For a long time, I believed that love was something you had to earn through obedience. I believed that family was a debt you had to pay, regardless of the cost to your soul." I paused. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the Solano row shifting uncomfortably. "But you taught me that love is not a transaction," I continued. "You taught me that loyalty is a choice, not a birthright. Today, I do not just take you as my husband. I choose you as my family. I choose us, above the past, above the obligation, above everything." I saw Alexander's eyes shimmer. He squeezed my hand so hard it almost hurt. "I promise to stand by you," I said. "Not because I have to, but because there is nowhere else in the world I would rather be. I promise to be your partner, your defender, and your home." When Alexander spoke his vows, his voice was thick with emotion. He promised to be the shelter I never had. He promised to be the one who showed up, every time. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the priest said, his voice relieved to be back on familiar ground. "You may kiss the bride." Alexander did not hesitate. He pulled me close, his hand cupping the back of my neck, his fingers brushing against the sapphire pin. He kissed me, and the world fell away. There was no Bianca, no Matteo, no judging eyes, just him and me. The organ roared to life with the recessional music, Mendelssohn's Wedding March. We turned to face the congregation. The applause started slowly, led by the Sterling side, and then swelled into a thunderous ovation. Even the people who had been whispering were clapping now, swept up in the undeniable power of the moment. I looked at the crowd. I saw the faces of the Chicago elite. They were smiling. They loved a survivor. They loved a story. And we had just given them the best show in town. I looked at the Solano row. Aunt Rosa was clapping, but her movements were stiff, mechanical. She looked like she had swallowed a lemon. Cousin Marco was looking down at his phone, probably texting my father. Let him text. I thought, let him tell Matteo that he missed the performance of a lifetime. We walked down the aisle, hand in hand. Flashbulbs popped, blinding white lights that froze the moment in time. As we reached the heavy oak doors at the back of the chapel, the ushers pulled them open again. We stepped out of the sanctuary and into the cool, quiet hallway. The doors swung shut behind us, muting the applause and the organ music. We stopped. The silence of the corridor was profound. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 3 hours. My shoulders dropped. The corset of my dress felt a little less tight. "We did it," Alexander said, turning to me. He looked exhilarated, his eyes bright with adrenaline. "We did it," I repeated. I touched the pin in my hair. I thought about Julian sitting in that front row, claiming his place. I thought about the look on Aunt Rosa's face. But mostly, I thought about the emptiness inside me, the space where my father's approval used to live. For the first time in my life, that space did not feel like a hole. It felt like a room I had finally cleared of old, broken furniture. It was empty, yes, but it was clean, and now I could fill it with whatever I wanted. "Are you okay?" Alexander asked, checking me for signs of a crash. I looked at him, and a genuine smile spread across my face. Not the polite bride smile, a real one. "I am better than okay," I said. "I feel light." "Good," Alexander said, a dark, mischievous glint entering his eyes. "Hold on to that feeling, because Act 1 is over, but Act 2." He checked his watch. "Act 2 is where we burn the house down." I laughed. It was a sound that surprised me, a bubble of pure, dark joy. "Let's go to the reception," I said. "I believe I have a video to premiere." The flash of the photographer's camera was blinding, a rhythmic lightning strike that punctuated the surreal calmness of the post-ceremony interlude. We were in the Camellia Room, a smaller, sun-drenched space adjacent to the main ballroom, posing for the formal portraits. Alexander stood behind me, his arms wrapped around my waist, his chin resting gently on my shoulder. To the outside observer, we were the picture of marital bliss, a power couple solidifying their dynasty. "Turn your head slightly to the left, Carmen," the photographer instructed, waving a hand. "Chin down. Perfect. Now, give me that just married glow." I forced a smile, though my facial muscles were beginning to ache from the effort. Inside, I was still processing the adrenaline dump from the chapel, the sight of Julian in the front row, the shock on my aunt's face, the feeling of Alexander's hand in mine. It was all swirling in my mind like a kaleidoscope. I felt lighter, yes, but there was still a lingering phantom pain where my father should have been. It was like an amputated limb. I knew it was gone. But the nerve endings were still firing. "One more," the photographer chirped. "Alexander, look at her like she is the only woman in the world." Alexander tightened his hold on me, whispering against my ear. "You are doing amazing. 10 more minutes of this, and then I will get you a drink. A real one." I was about to reply when the heavy double doors of the room swung open with a jarring urgency. The photographer lowered his camera, annoyed by the interruption, but his expression cleared instantly when he saw who it was. David, Alexander's personal executive assistant and essentially the gatekeeper of his entire professional life, strode into the room. David was a man who never ran, never sweated, and never interrupted a schedule unless the building was on fire. He was wearing his signature navy suit, holding a tablet against his chest like a shield. His face, usually a mask of professional detachment, was pale. Alexander pulled away from me immediately, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. The playfulness vanished from his eyes, replaced by the sharp, predatory focus of a CEO. "David," Alexander asked, his voice low, "I told you, no interruptions unless the stock market crashes or the building is under siege." "Sir," David said, stopping a few feet away. He glanced at the photographer, then at me, then back to Alexander. "We have a situation. You need to see this, immediately." "Can it wait 20 minutes?" Alexander asked, gesturing to the camera. "No, sir," David said. The tone of his voice was final. "It concerns the security detail you ordered for the Solano family." My stomach dropped. The phantom pain flared into a sharp, sickening twist. Security detail. I looked at Alexander. "You had them watched?" I asked. Alexander didn't look at me. He was looking at David. "Show me." "I hired a private investigator," Alexander explained to me rapidly as he walked toward David. "I didn't trust Bianca not to show up and cause a scene. I wanted a perimeter. I wanted to know where she was at all times." I felt a surge of gratitude mixed with dread. Alexander had been anticipating a physical attack, a drink thrown, a dress ripped. But as he took the tablet from David's hands and looked at the screen, his face transformed. The color drained from his skin. His jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscle feathering beneath his cheek. A vein in his temple began to throb. "That son of a bitch," Alexander whispered. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated venom. He tapped the screen furiously, then looked up at David. "Is this live?" "Yes, sir." David replied. Streamed 2 minutes ago. It is still ongoing. Alexander turned the tablet off and shoved it back at David. Kill the feed. Burn it. Do not let Carmen see that. He turned to me, his hands raised as if to physically block me from the truth. Carmen, we are going to the reception. We are going to have a drink. You are not going to worry about this. The tone of his voice set off every alarm bell in my body. It wasn't the tone of a man protecting me from a nuisance. It was the tone of a man shielding a child from a gruesome accident scene. What is it? I asked, stepping forward. Nothing, Alexander lied, but he was a terrible liar when he was angry. Just Bianca being Bianca. She is acting out. It is better if you ignore it. Show me, I said. Carmen. No, Alexander pleaded. Trust me. You do not want to see this on your wedding day. It will only hurt you. I am done being protected. Alexander, I said, my voice cutting through the room. I walked down that aisle alone. I can handle a tablet screen. Show me. I held out my hand. Alexander hesitated. He looked at David, who looked equally uncomfortable. Then, with a heavy sigh of defeat, Alexander took the tablet back and handed it to me. Do not say I didn't warn you, he muttered. I took the device. It was an iPad Pro. The screen crisp and bright. On the display was an Instagram interface. It was a screen recording of a close friend's story. The green circle indicating it was meant only for a select, inner circle of trusted followers. The account belonged to Bianca. I pressed play. The sound hit me first. It was the bass. The same heavy, rhythmic thumping I had heard on the phone call with my father an hour ago. Then came the wind noise, the rushing of air that distorted the audio. The image stabilized. It was not a crisis center. It was not a lawyer's office. It was the sun deck of a yacht. The boat was moving fast, cutting through turquoise water that was definitely not Lake Michigan. Based on the skyline in the distance, it looked like Miami. Bianca filled the frame. She was wearing a neon pink string bikini and holding a magnum bottle of Dom Perignon. She looked euphoric, her eyes glassy with intoxication, her hair whipping in the wind. There were no tears. There was no anxiety. There was no PR malfunction. She yelled into the camera, slurring her words slightly. Guess who is free, she shrieked, popping a strawberry into her mouth. Best day ever. The old man bought it. He actually bought it. The camera panned around the deck. There were about 10 other people hangers-on, D-list influencers, the kind of people who gravitated toward Bianca's money like moths to a flame. They were dancing, drinking, and laughing. Then, the camera landed on a figure sitting in the corner on a white leather banquette. My breath hitched. It was my father. Matteo Solano was still wearing the suit he must have put on for work that morning, but his tie was gone, and his shirt was unbuttoned to his sternum. He held a tumbler of amber liquid in a shaking hand. He looked disoriented, sweating profusely in the humid heat, a stark contrast to the young, hard bodies dancing around him. He looked old. He looked pathetic. A young man with bleached blonde hair, one of Bianca's model friends, leaned over and poked my father in the shoulder. Hey, ATM, the boy shouted over the music. We are out of vodka. Tap the card again. My father blinked, offering a sloppy, confused smile. Anything for the launch, he mumbled, his speech thick with alcohol. Is everyone happy? Is Bianca happy? She is thrilled. Pops, the boy laughed, then turned to the camera and winked. Mobile bank is open for business, ladies and gentlemen. The camera swung back to Bianca. She was laughing so hard she was doubled over. Oh my God, she gasped, wiping a tear of mirth from her eye. He thinks he is saving the company. He thinks he is a hero. Meanwhile, little Miss Perfect is probably walking down the aisle right now realizing nobody loves her. She brought the camera closer to her face, her expression twisting into a cruel, mocking pout. Hey, Carmen, she shouted directly into the lens. How is the dress? Is it wet yet? Are you crying? Boo-hoo, Daddy. Likes me better. Daddy always likes me better. Enjoy your boring wedding with your boring husband. We are going to Ibiza next week on the inheritance. The video ended on a freeze frame of her tongue sticking out, a gesture of pure, childish malice. I stood there in the camellia room, staring at the frozen image. I waited for the tears. I waited for the heartbreak. I waited for the familiar crushing weight of rejection to buckle my knees. But it didn't come. Instead, a strange sensation washed over me. It was cold. Ice cold. It started at the base of my spine and spread outward, freezing the blood in my veins. It was the absolute zero of emotion. The grief I had felt earlier the morning for the father who couldn't be there evaporated instantly, because that father didn't exist. The man on that screen was not a victim of circumstance. He was not a busy professional torn between two daughters. He was a fool, a weak, vain, a pathetic fool who allowed himself to be treated like a wallet by a daughter who openly despised him, all because he was too cowardly to face a woman who demanded respect. He wasn't protecting Bianca. He was buying her affection because it was the only kind he understood. And Bianca. She wasn't sick. She wasn't fragile. She was a predator. I handed the tablet back to David. My hand was perfectly steady. Carmen. Alexander touched my arm. His voice was gentle, terrified. Talk to me. Scream. Throw something. Do not go quiet. You are scaring me. I looked up at Alexander. I saw the fear in his eyes. He thought I was breaking. He thought this was the final straw that would send me into a spiral of depression. He was wrong. This wasn't a break. It was a breakthrough. I am not going to scream, I said. My voice sounded different to my own ears, deeper, flatter, devoid of any tremble. Screaming is for victims. I am not a victim. I turned to David. The assistant straightened up, recognizing the shift in authority. David, I said, this video, you have the file. Yes, ma'am, David replied. The P, I sent the raw footage file, not just the stream link. Good, I said. I looked at the closed doors of the ballroom. Beyond them, 300 people were waiting for the happy couple. They were waiting for speeches. They were waiting for a toast. Is the audiovisual system in the ballroom connected to the main server? I asked. David blinked, confused. Yes, ma'am. We have a projector for the montage of childhood photos scheduled for after the appetizers. Scrap the montage, I ordered. Carmen. Alexander stepped in front of me. What are you doing? I am giving my sister what she wants, I said, a small, dangerous smile touching my lips. She wants attention. She wants to be the star. She wants everyone to know about her launch. I pointed at the tablet. Connect that video to the main projector, I commanded David. I want it queued up. Do not play it yet. Wait for my signal. Carmen, are you sure? Alexander asked, gripping my shoulders. This is scorched earth. If you play that, there is no going back. You will humiliate him. You will destroy her. It will be a scandal. They humiliated me first, I said softly. They have humiliated me for 26 years. They banked on my silence. They banked on my class. They thought I would hide their dirty laundry to protect the family name. I reached up and touched Alexander's cheek. But I am sterling now. Remember, and we don't let people disrespect us. Alexander searched my eyes. He was looking for hesitation. He found none. He found only the cold, hard resolve of a woman who had finally realized that mercy was a waste of time on people who fed on blood. Slowly, the corner of Alexander's mouth lifted. The predator in him recognized the predator in me. David, Alexander said, not looking away from me. Yes, sir. Do as she says, Alexander ordered. Hook it up. Make sure the audio is at maximum volume. I want the bass to rattle the teeth of everyone in the back row. Yes, sir, David said. He tapped on the tablet, his fingers flying. It will be ready in 5 minutes. Perfect, I said. I smoothed the skirt of my Vera Wang gown, the dress that Bianca had mocked, the dress that she thought was stained with tears. It was not stained, it was armor. Shall we go to our party? Husband, I asked. Alexander offered me his arm. After you, wife. We walked toward the ballroom doors. The photographer, who had been watching the entire exchange in stunned silence, lowered his camera. He looked terrified. I didn't blame him. The wedding was over, the reception was about to begin, and the entertainment, it was going to be lethal. I thought of my father on that yacht, drunk and laughing, thinking he had successfully managed his 2 daughters. He thought he was the puppet master. He thought he was safe in Miami, shielded by distance and lies. He had no idea that I wasn't just bringing him to the wedding, I was bringing the wedding to him. I signaled the ushers. The doors opened. The noise of the crowd washed over us, laughter, clinking glasses, the hum of anticipation. I stepped into the light, smiling. It was the brightest, most radiant smile of my life, because for the first time, I wasn't holding a bouquet of flowers. I was holding the detonator. The grand ballroom of the Drake Hotel had been transformed into a galaxy of crystal and candlelight. Overhead, massive chandeliers the size of small cars suspended from the gold-leafed ceiling, casting a warm, flattering glow over the 300 guests who were currently navigating their way through the second course of the dinner service. The air was thick with the scent of roasted squab, truffle oil, and the expensive, powdery perfume of Chicago's social elite. A jazz band was playing a smooth, down-tempo rendition of a Cole Porter classic on the stage, providing a sophisticated backdrop to the murmur of polite conversation. Waiters in white tuxedo jackets moved like ghosts between the tables, refilling champagne flutes with a seamless efficiency that rendered them almost invisible. I sat at the head table, Alexander to my right, Uncle Julian to my left. To the casual observer, I was the picture of a serene, happy bride. I smiled at the appropriate times. I nodded when Alexander's Aunt Margaret waved her napkin at me from table 4. I took small, measured sips of my water. But beneath the table, my hands were resting on my lap, fingers interlaced so tightly that my knuckles were aching. I was not eating, I was waiting. The tablet containing the evidence, the nuclear bomb that would obliterate my family's facade, was connected to the audiovisual booth. David had given me the subtle thumbs up 5 minutes ago. The video was cued. The projector was warmed up. All I had to do was give the signal. But I was waiting for the right moment. I wanted the speeches to begin. I wanted the attention to be fully focused on the stage. I wanted maximum impact. "You are staring at the door," Alexander whispered, leaning in close so only I could hear. His hand found my knee under the tablecloth, his thumb rubbing circles against the silk of my dress. "Relax. He is not coming. He has probably passed out on that boat by now." "He will come," I said, my voice low and certain. "He is a narcissist. Alexander. He cannot stand the idea of a room full of important people forgetting about him. He will show up just to make sure his name is mentioned." Alexander frowned, scanning the room. "If he shows up, security will stop him at the perimeter." "No," I corrected. "I told David to let him in." Alexander turned to look at me, his eyes wide. "You what?" "I want him here," I said, taking a sip of water. The coolness of the liquid felt good against my dry throat. "A trial needs a defendant. Alex, it is no fun sentencing an empty chair." Before Alexander could respond, the atmosphere in the room shifted. It was not a sound. At first, it was a change in air pressure. The heavy double doors at the main entrance, which had been closed to keep the party intimate, were thrown open with a violence that caused the heavy brass handles to clang against the wall. Bang! The sound cut through the jazz music like a gunshot. Heads turned. Forks paused halfway to mouths. The conversations died out in a ripple effect, starting from the tables nearest the door and spreading rapidly to the head table. And there he was. Matteo Solano stood in the doorway, framed by the light of the corridor behind him. He looked like a man who had been running through a hurricane. His expensive Italian suit, usually tailored to within an inch of its life, was rumpled and stained with dark patches of sweat. His tie was pulled loose, hanging crookedly around his neck like a noose. His hair, usually gelled into a helmet of perfection, was windblown and sticking up in tufts. He stood there, panting, his chest heaving up and down. His eyes scanned the room wildly, manic and bloodshot, until they locked onto me. A slow, grotesque smile spread across his face. It was the smile of a politician who had just arrived at a rally he was late for practiced. Wide and completely empty. "Carmen," he bellowed. His voice boomed across the silent ballroom, slurring slightly on the vowels. "Daddy is here, I made it." He began to walk toward the head table. It was not a walk. It was a stumble. He moved with a heavy, flat-footed gait, knocking into the back of a chair at table 12 as he passed. The guest sitting there, a venerable judge, recoiled, pulling his drink away to avoid a collision. "Sorry, sorry," my father shouted, waving a dismissive hand without looking back. "Emergency, family, emergency. But I am here now. The father of the bride has arrived." He was putting on a show. I could see the gears turning in his head. He was playing the role of the harried hero, the devoted father who had moved mountains and crossed oceans to be with his daughter. Despite the odds, as he got closer, the smell hit me. It was a noxious cloud that preceded him by 5 feet. It was the smell of stale champagne, briny lake water, cigars, and a heavy dose of women's perfume that was definitely not the brand my mother used to wear. It was the smell of a debauched afternoon on a yacht, barely masked by a frantic attempt to freshen up in a car. He reached the dance floor area in front of the head table. He opened his arms wide, posing for the photographers who had instinctively raised their cameras. Sensing drama. "Carmen, my baby!" he cried out, his voice cracking with feigned emotion. "Come here. Come give your old man a hug. I need a picture with my beautiful bride." He lunged toward me. He expected me to do what I had done for 26 years. He expected me to stand up, smile, accept the hug, and whisper, "It is okay, Dad," in his ear while he sweated alcohol onto my dress. He expected me to save him from his own mess. I stood up. But I did not step forward. I waited until he was 2 steps away, until his arms were closing in, and then I took a sharp, deliberate step backward and to the left. It was a small movement, but the effect was catastrophic. My father, who had committed his entire shifting weight to the embrace, found himself grasping at empty air. His momentum carried him forward. He stumbled, his polished dress shoes slipping on the waxed parquet floor. He flailed, his arms windmilling desperately to regain his balance. He managed to stay upright, but only by grabbing the edge of the head table with a heavy thud that rattled the silverware and sent a glass of water tipping over. The water spilled onto the tablecloth, spreading in a dark stain right in front of him. The room was deadly silent. The band had stopped playing. 300 pairs of eyes were fixed on the spectacle. My father gripped the table, his knuckles white. He looked up at me, his face flushing a deep, ugly shade of crimson. The embarrassment in his eyes was quickly replaced by a flash of pure, unadulterated rage. "What is the matter with you?" he hissed, loud enough for the first 3 rows of tables to hear. He straightened up, brushing imaginary dust off his lapels, trying to regain his composure. He turned to the crowd, flashing that manic smile again, then turned back to me, his voice rising to a shout. "I rush here," he yelled, gesturing wildly. "I dropped everything I leave your sister's side to be here for you, and this is how you greet me. You make me look like a fool." I looked at him calmly. "You are drunk, Dad." "I am not drunk," he screamed. The denial was so loud it echoed off the high ceiling. "I am exhausted. Do you know what I have been doing for the last 6 hours? Do you—" He pointed a shaking finger at me. "I have been at the hospital with Bianca. She collapsed. She fainted from the stress of the launch. The doctor said it was total physical exhaustion. I was holding her hand while she was on an IV drip, Carmen, and 4th drip." He looked around the room, seeking sympathy from the audience. "My youngest daughter is lying in a hospital bed, fighting for her health. And I left her. I left my sick child to come here for this one. And look at the attitude I get. Look at the selfishness." The murmurs started again. I could see some of the guests looking uncertain. The lie was detailed. It was emotional. And for people who didn't know Matteo Solano, it sounded plausible. Poor man. Their faces seemed to say, torn between a wedding and a hospital. My father saw the hesitation in the crowd and pressed his advantage. He turned back to me, his face twisted into a mask of righteous indignation. "You have always been like this," he spat. "Cold, unfeeling. Your sister is suffering, and you are just standing there in your $15,000 dress, judging me. You do not deserve my effort. You do not deserve to be a Solano." He stepped forward again, aggressively this time, invading my personal space. The smell of alcohol was overpowering now, making me nauseous. "Apologize," he demanded, his voice dropping to a menacing growl. "Apologize to me and to the guests for your behavior. Hug your father. Smile for the camera. Fix this. Now." I stared at him. I looked at the sweat beading on his forehead. I looked at the dilated pupils. I looked at the man who had missed my graduation, my birthdays, and my ceremony, standing here demanding I fix his reputation one last time. I opened my mouth to speak, but a shadow moved across my field of vision. Uncle Julian stepped out from behind the table. He moved with a quiet, dangerous fluidity. He did not rush. He simply placed himself directly between me and my father. He stood like a boulder, solid and immovable. Julian was 2 inches shorter than Matteo, but at that moment, he looked 10 feet tall. "Step back, Matteo," Julian said. His voice was not loud, but it carried a weight that cut through my father's shouting like a knife through rotten fruit. My father blinked, seemingly noticing his brother for the first time. The shock on his face was genuine. "You," my father breathed. "What are you doing here?" "I am doing your job," Julian said calmly. "I am giving the bride away, and now, I am protecting her from the drunk who crashed her wedding." "You have no right," my father snarled, his face contorting. "I kicked you out of this family 10 years ago. You are a thief. You are a disgrace." "And yet," Julian said, crossing his arms over his chest, "I am the one standing next to her, and you are the one smelling like a frat party on a pontoon boat." The insult landed. My father's eyes bulged. "I was at the hospital," my father screamed, spraying spit. "Do not you dare call me a liar. You are poisoning her against me. You always were jealous. You wanted my life. You wanted my success. You wanted my daughters." "I never wanted your life, Matteo," Julian said, his voice dripping with disdain. "I just wanted you to be a man, but clearly, that is too much to ask." My father snapped. The veneer of the civilized lawyer vanished completely. With a guttural roar of frustration, he pulled his arm back. "Get out of my way," he screamed. He swung his hand. It was a clumsy, violent arc aimed squarely at Julian's face. It was the kind of slap meant to humiliate, to assert dominance, to silence the truth with force. I gasped, "Julian," but the blow never landed. Before my father's hand could connect, a large hand clamped around his wrist in midair. It wasn't Julian. Julian hadn't even flinched. It was the head of Alexander's private security detail, a man named Marcus, who was built like a tank and moved with the speed of a viper. He had materialized from the side of the stage the moment my father raised his voice. Marcus twisted my father's arm behind his back in one smooth, professional motion. "Ah," my father yelped, bent double by the pressure on his shoulder joint. "Let go of me. Do you know who I am? I am Matteo Solano. I am a lawyer. I will sue you. I will sue all of you." "You are disturbing the peace, sir," Marcus said, his voice flat and bored. "And you just attempted to assault a guest." "Alexander," my father shouted, looking past Julian to where my husband was sitting. "Call off your dogs. This is insane. This is your father-in-law." Alexander stood up slowly. He adjusted his cufflinks. He picked up his glass of champagne. He looked at my father with the same expression one might use to look at a cockroach on a kitchen floor, mild disgust, but mostly indifference. "Actually, Matteo," Alexander said coolly, "my father-in-law is the man standing in front of you, the man you just tried to hit. You are just a trespassing liability." Alexander turned to me. "Carmen, do you want him removed?" The room waited. My father twisted in Marcus's grip, his face red and sweaty, panting like a trapped animal. Carmen, tell them, he pleaded, switching tactics instantly from aggression to begging. Tell them to stop. I am your dad. I came for you. Bianca is sick. Have some heart. He was still lying, even with his arm twisted behind his back. Even in the face of total humiliation, he was clinging to the lie about the hospital. He truly believed he could talk his way out of this. I looked at him. I felt that cold, icy calm spread through me again. No, I said clearly. Do not remove him yet. Carmen, Alexander asked, surprised. He says he was at the hospital, I said, my voice projecting to the back of the room. He says Bianca is sick. He says he is a victim. I walked around the table until I was standing right in front of the stage, looking down at my father. I think we should verify that, I said. After all, if my sister is truly dying in a hospital bed, we should all be very concerned. We should see the truth. What? What are you talking about? My father stammered, a flicker of true fear entering his eyes for the first time. I turned to the audiovisual booth in the back of the room. I raised my hand. David, I commanded, play the video. The lights in the ballroom dimmed suddenly. The massive projection screen behind the stage, usually reserved for sentimental slideshows of the couple growing up, flickered to life. My father still went. He craned his neck to look at the screen. No, he whispered. No. Happy launch day, Daddy, I whispered back. And then, the sound of the bass dropped. The bass from the speakers had just begun to vibrate the floorboards, a low, ominous rumble that promised violence, when the double doors at the back of the ballroom flew open for the second time that night. Stop, a voice shrieked, piercing through the tension like a glass shard. Stop everything. David, the technician, instinctively hit the pause button on the console. The screen behind me went black just as the first pixelated image of the yacht began to form. The room fell into a confused, heavy silence. All heads turned toward the entrance. If my father's entrance had been a tragedy, this was a farce. Bianca stood in the doorway. For a woman who was allegedly lying in a hospital bed with an IV drip attached to her arm mere minutes ago, she looked miraculously vibrant. In fact, she looked ready for the red carpet. She was wearing a fire engine red ball gown, a deliberate, aggressive choice meant to clash with my white wedding dress and draw every single eye in the room to her. The bodice was encrusted with crystals that caught the light of the chandeliers, and the skirt was so voluminous it practically required its own zip code. She was not pale. She was bronzed with a fresh spray tan. Her hair was blown out in perfect, glossy waves. Her makeup was heavy, a smoky eye look that suggested a night out at a club, not a night in the ER. She took a step forward and then, as if suddenly remembering her script, she slumped against the door frame, bringing a manicured hand to her forehead in a pose of Victorian swooning. I made it, she gasped, her voice breathless and theatrical. I pulled the needles out. I told the doctors I did not care if I died. I had to see my sister. The performance was so bad it almost insulted the intelligence of everyone in the room. My father, still red-faced and panting from his altercation with security, saw his savior. He wrestled his arm free from Marcus, who looked at me for permission, and I nodded slightly to release him and scrambled toward her. Bianca, he cried, rushing down the center aisle. My poor angel. What are you doing? You are sick. You are fragile. I am fine, Daddy, Bianca said, allowing him to support her weight as she limped. Yes, she was actually limping now, despite wearing 6-inch stilettos toward the stage. I could not let Carmen celebrate alone. I am the maid of honor. It is my duty. They moved toward us like a 2-person parade of dysfunction. The guests watched in stunned fascination. This was no longer a wedding. It was a reality TV show filming a season finale, and nobody dared to look away. Bianca reached the foot of the stage. She looked up at me, her eyes glittering with malice. Up close, I could smell the same distinct cocktail of expensive vodka and sea salt that clung to my father. Carmen, she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness, you look adequate, Vera Wang. It is a bit dated, isn't it? but it suits you. Very traditional." She turned to the crowd, flashing a bright smile. "I have a surprise," she announced, clapping her hands. Two waiters, who had clearly been bribed or bullied into service, struggled into the room carrying a large object draped in a velvet cloth. They set it up on an easel right in front of the head table. "I know I missed the ceremony because of my health crisis," Bianca said, placing a hand on her chest. "But I spent the last month working on this, a masterpiece, a labor of love. I wanted to give it to you here, in front of everyone, so you know how much I cherish our family." "Oh, honey," my father sniffled, wiping his nose with his sleeve. "You are too good, too pure." "Open it," Bianca commanded the waiters. The velvet cloth was whipped away. There was a collective gasp from the audience, but this time it was not out of shock at a scandal. It was out of sheer awkwardness. It was an oil painting. It was large, perhaps 4 feet by 5 feet. The style was amateurish, the proportions slightly off, but the subjects were clear. It was a portrait of the Solano family. There was my father, looking distinguished and tall in a suit. There was my mother, looking ethereal and beautiful, painted from an old photograph. And there was Bianca, painted front and center, wearing a gold dress and a tiara, holding my father's hand. That was it. There were only 3 people in the painting. I scanned the canvas. I looked at the background. I looked at the corners. I was not there. The silence in the room stretched thin, brittle as dry leaves. "It is beautiful," I said, my voice flat. "But I think the artist forgot something." "Oh, no," Bianca laughed, a light, tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. "It is intentional, silly. This is a portrait of the core family, you know, before you left to join the Sterlings, before you became one of them." She stepped closer, her voice dropping so only I in the front row could hear the venom. "I wanted you to have this so you never forget where you come from." She smirked. "And so you remember that even when you are gone, nothing changes. We are complete without you. You were always just extra." It was a public declaration of erasure. She was telling 300 people that I did not belong, that I was unloved, that I was easily removed. My father stared at the painting, tears streaming down his face, but they were tears of pride. "Look at that," he sobbed, pointing at the image of himself. "She captured my eyes. And your mother, oh, Bianca, you are an artist. You are a genius." He turned to me, his face hardening. "Carmen, say thank you. Your sister climbed out of a deathbed to bring you this masterpiece. Why are you standing there like a statue? Where are your tears? Where is your heart?" "She is overwhelmed, Daddy," Bianca cooed, patting his arm. "She knows she does not deserve it. It is okay. I forgive her for being cold. I am a bigger person." She looked at Alexander, batting her eyelashes. "Alexander, surely you appreciate art. It is worth at least $10,000. Consider it my wedding gift to you. You can hang it in your foyer." Alexander looked at the painting, then at Bianca. His expression was one of polite horror. "It is certainly revealing," Alexander said dryly. "It is trash," Uncle Julian said from his seat, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Quiet. You convict," my father snapped at Julian. I stepped forward. I picked up a microphone from the table. The feedback whined slightly, silencing the room instantly. I looked at the painting one last time. It was the perfect metaphor for my life, my father, my mother, and the parasite that had consumed them both. "Thank you, Bianca," I said into the microphone. My voice was calm, warm, and terrifyingly steady. "It is truly a revelation. You have shown everyone exactly who you are, and exactly what this family means to you." I walked around the table and stood next to my sister. The contrast was stark me in white silk, her in screaming red satin. "You know," I continued, addressing the crowd, "it is funny that you mention gifts, Bianca, because I also prepared a gift, for you and for Dad." Bianca's smile faltered slightly. "Oh, I didn't see a box." "It is not in a box," I said. It is a digital gift, a memory. Since you brought up the past, and where I come from, I thought it would be appropriate to share a very recent memory, one that shows just how deep the bond between you and Dad really is.
What is she talking about? My father asked, looking nervous. Carmen, no more games. Let's sit down and eat.
I insist, I said. Please, Dad. Bianca, look at the screen. This is my tribute to your resilience. I turned to the back of the room. I raised my hand high in the air.
David, I said, my voice ringing out like a judge delivering a verdict. Lights?
The chandeliers dimmed until the room was plunged into near darkness, save for the emergency exit signs. Sound, I commanded.
The speakers crackled to life. Action.
The massive LED screen behind the stage exploded with light. There was no pause this time, no interruption. The image was 10 feet tall and crystal clear. The blue water of the ocean flooded the room with light. The white deck of the yacht gleamed, and Bianca's face, magnified 100 times, appeared on the screen, holding a magnum of champagne, her mouth open in a scream of drunken delight. "Guess who is free?" Bianca on the screen shrieked, her voice booming through the subwoofer, shaking the crystal glasses on the tables. The Bianca standing next to me froze. Her mouth dropped open. The color that had been artificially sprayed onto her skin seemed to drain away, leaving her looking gray and ghostly. The video played on, the dancing, the shots, the mockery. The old man bought it. He actually bought it. The crowd gasped. I saw Aunt Rosa cover her mouth with her hand. I saw the Sterling family exchanging dark, knowing looks. Then, the camera panned to my father on the screen, the ATM, the mobile bank. "I am at the hospital," the video father slurred, while the real father stood on the dance floor, watching his own humiliation play out in high definition. The room was so quiet that the sound of the video seemed deafening. "Daddy likes me better," the screen Bianca taunted. "Enjoy your boring wedding." I watched my sister. She was trembling now, real trembling, not the fake, theatrical shake she had used earlier. I watched my father. He was staring at the screen, his eyes wide, his mouth slightly ajar. He looked like a man who had been shot in the gut, but hadn't realized he was bleeding yet. The video ended with the image of Bianca sticking her tongue out. The screen went black. The lights came back up, harsh and unforgiving. "Thank you for the painting, Bianca," I said into the silence. "I think my gift was a little more accurate." The video on the massive screen did not stop. It was a compilation, a montage of malice that I had instructed David to stitch together from the raw footage the private investigator had intercepted. The initial shock of seeing the yacht had passed, replaced by a horrified fascination that gripped the entire room. The bass of the club music thumping from the speakers seemed to synchronize with the collective heartbeat of the audience. A rhythmic dread that grew louder with every second. On the screen, the camera angle shifted. It was a selfie video now, taken close to Bianca's face. She was holding a cocktail that sparkled under the strobe lights of the boat. Her eyes were glazed, not just with alcohol, but with the arrogance of someone who believes they are untouchable. "You guys will not believe how easy it was," the digital Bianca shouted over the music, her voice distorted by the wind, but unmistakably clear in its cruelty. I literally squeezed out 2 tears, told him I was feeling pressured by the media, and boom, he handed over the credit card. He is such a puppet, an old, sad puppet. A collective gasp rippled through the ballroom. I saw Mr. Henderson, the senior managing partner at my father's law firm, drop his fork. It hit his china plate with a sharp clang. He looked at my father not with sympathy, but with the kind of cold, professional disgust reserved for a liability. To a man like Henderson, being scammed was embarrassing, but being scammed by your own daughter because you were too weak to see the truth, that was unforgivable. That was a sign of incompetence. My father stood frozen at the foot of the stage. His face, previously flushed with rage, had drained of all color. He looked like a wax figure melting under a heat lamp. His mouth hung open, but no sound came out. He was watching his own image on the screen, the puppet being mocked by the very person he had spent the last hour defending.
Turn it off.
The shriek came from the real Bianca. She had snapped out of her paralysis. Her face was a mask of sheer terror. She lunged toward the audiovisual booth, her red dress swishing violently around her legs. "Turn it off right now," she screamed, her voice cracking. "It is fake. It is a deep fake. She made it up." She tried to scramble up the side steps of the stage to get to the cables, to rip them out, to do anything to stop the flow of truth. But she never made it. Sarah and Jessica, my two bridesmaids, stepped into her path. They moved with a coordinated grace, blocking the stairs like sentinels in dusty blue chiffon. Sarah, who had spent years listening to me cry about Bianca's bullying in the break room at Nebula Horizons, looked particularly satisfied. "I do not think so," Sarah said, crossing her arms.
"Get out of my way, you bitch!" Bianca snarled, raising a hand to shove Sarah.
Sarah did not budge. She simply caught Bianca's wrist in midair and pushed her back. "Sit down, Bianca. The movie is not over yet." Bianca stumbled back, her high heels wobbling on the parquet floor. She looked around wildly for help, but there was none. The security guard stood impassively at the perimeter. The guests were glued to the screen. She was trapped in the spotlight she had always craved, but now it was burning her alive. On the screen, the video cut to a new clip. The music had died down in this one. It was quieter, more intimate. Bianca was sitting in the cabin of the yacht, surrounded by three of her sycophantic friends. They were looking at a document on the table.
"Wait, are you sure this is safe?" one of the friends asked off-camera.
Bianca laughed. It was a dark, ugly sound. "Safe it is foolproof. He never checks the trust fund statements. He thinks the money is locked up until I am 30. But guess what?" She held up a pen. It was a Mont Blanc, my father's favorite brand. "I spent an hour practicing his signature last night," Bianca bragged, twirling the pen between her fingers. "It is actually pathetic how shaky his hand is getting. It was so easy to copy. Look." The camera zoomed in. On the table was a withdrawal slip from the Solano Family Trust. The amount written on the line was $200,000. And at the bottom, in shaky, looped ink, was the signature Matteo Solano. "Authorized and approved." Bianca mimicked my father's deep voice, then dissolved into giggles. "Thanks for the boat, Daddy, and thanks for the inheritance." The air in the ballroom was sucked out. This was no longer just a family drama. This was a felony. This was grand larceny and fraud, captured on video, confessed to with a smile. I looked at my father. He was shaking, a violent physical tremor that started in his hands and took over his entire body. He was staring at the screen with eyes that looked like they were bleeding. This was the man who prided himself on his legal acumen. This was the man who had built a career on spotting lies. And here was proof, 10 feet tall, that he had been robbed blind by the daughter he had protected at the expense of everyone else. He had accused Julian of stealing $50,000, a crime Julian never committed. And all the while, the thief was sleeping down the hall, forging his name and laughing at his blindness. The video cut to the final clip. It was Bianca again, back on the deck, holding a glass of champagne high in the air against the backdrop of a setting sun. "A toast," she yelled to her friends, "to my big sister Carmen." The crowd on the boat cheered mockingly. "To Carmen?" "Thank God she's finally getting married," Bianca sneered, looking directly into the lens. "Because now that she is sterling, Daddy thinks she does not need the money anymore. He is going to rewrite the will next week. Everything goes to me, the house, the accounts, the portfolio." She took a long sip of champagne, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. "So thanks for being such a stupid, gullible cow, Carmen," she said, her eyes gleaming with triumph. "You get the husband, I get the empire. Enjoy your wedding cake. I hope you choke on it." The video froze on that image, Bianca's face twisted in a sneer, the champagne glass raised in a salute to her own greed. The screen went black. For 5 seconds, there was no sound in the grand ballroom, no music, no clinking of glasses, no whispers. It was the silence of a tomb. It was the silence of 300 people simultaneously realizing they had just witnessed a social execution. I slowly lowered the microphone I had been holding. I did not need to shout. In this silence, a whisper would have sounded like a scream. I walked to the edge of the stage. I looked down at my father. He was standing alone. The guests at the tables nearest to him had physically pulled their chairs back, creating a circle of isolation around him. He looked small. He looked broken. He looked like a man who had just woken up from a 20-year coma to find the world he knew was gone. His eyes met mine. There was no anger in them anymore. There was only a hollow, bottomless horror. He looked from me to the frozen black screen, and then to the real Bianca, who was standing near the bridesmaids, her chest heaving, her face a portrait of ruin. "Dad," I said. My voice was steady. It was the only steady thing in the room. "That video was time-stamped 3 hours ago," I said. 3 hours ago, when you told me you were holding her hand in the emergency room." I took a step closer, looking down at him from the height of the stage. "Tell me, Dad," I asked, my voice cutting through the air like a scalpel. "Is that the hospital you were talking about? Is that the IV drip? Or is that just the price tag of your favorite daughter's love?" My father made a sound. It was a strangled, choking noise, like an animal caught in a trap. He raised a hand toward me, his fingers trembling, as if reaching for an explanation that did not exist. "Carmen," he croaked. I did not know." "You did not look," I corrected him. "You never looked, because looking would have meant admitting you were wrong, and you would rather sacrifice me than admit you backed the wrong horse." I gestured to the painting of the core family that still stood on the easel, the painting that had erased me. "You wanted a family without me?" I asked. "Congratulations, Mateo. You finally have it. You have a thief, you have a liar, and you have a fraud. They are all yours." I turned my back on him. I looked at Alexander, who was standing by his chair, his face hard as stone. "I think," I said to my husband, "that the entertainment portion of the evening is concluded. Don't you?" Alexander nodded slowly. "I believe it is." But before anyone could move, a sound erupted from the floor. It was a scream, but it wasn't fear. It was rage. "You bitch." Bianca broke free from the shock that had held her. She ignored the bridesmaids. She ignored the security, fueled by the adrenaline of total destruction. She lunged not at me, but at the easel. She grabbed the painting, her masterpiece, and hurled it to the floor. The canvas tore. The frame cracked with a loud snap. "You ruined everything!" she screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me. Her face twisted into something ugly and unrecognizable. "You were supposed to just leave. You were supposed to disappear. Why do you always have to ruin my life?" She spun around to face our father. "And you," she shrieked at him, "you stupid old man, why did you come here? Why didn't you just stay on the boat if you hadn't come here? None of this would have happened. You ruin everything you touch." My father recoiled, as if she had slapped him, the princess he had coddled. The girl he had protected from every consequence was now turning on him with the ferocity of a cornered rat. "Bianca," he whispered, his voice trembling. "What are you saying?" "I am saying I hate you," she screamed, tearing at her own hair, her extensions coming loose. "I have always hated you. You are weak. You are pathetic. And the only reason I tolerate you is because you pay for my life, and now you let her humiliate me. You let her show that video. Do something, fix it." She grabbed him by the lapels of his ruined suit and shook him. "Fix it. Daddy, make them stop looking at me." The sight was grotesque. The golden child, unraveling in real time, assaulting the father who had given her everything. And in that moment, something in Mateo Solano finally snapped. The cognitive dissonance that had blinded him for 2 decades shattered. The illusion of the sweet, fragile daughter dissolved, leaving only the monster he had created. He did not push her away. He did not hug her. He just stood there, letting her shake him, staring into her eyes with a look of absolute, terrifying clarity. "I cannot fix this," he said softly. "Then you are useless," Bianca screamed, raising her hand to claw at his face. But this time, no security guard intervened. They didn't have to. My father caught her hand. He held it tight. He looked at the manicured nails. He looked at the expensive bracelet he had probably bought her. "I am useless," he repeated, his voice gaining strength. "Yes, I suppose I have been." And then, for the first time in his life, Matteo Solano did not apologize. He did not bargain. He tightened his grip on her wrist until she gasped in pain. "But I am done paying for it," he said. The silence that followed was heavier than anything that had come before. It was the silence of a bridge burning, the flames licking at the sky, illuminating the wreckage of a family that had been dead for a long time, but was only now finally being buried. The air in the ballroom was so thick with tension that it felt difficult to breathe, as if the oxygen had been replaced by pure, unadulterated adrenaline. The echo of Bianca's scream, "I hate you," was still bouncing off the gold-leafed ceiling when she seemed to realize the gravity of her confession. Her eyes darted around the room, taking in the hundreds of faces staring at her with a mixture of horror and fascination. She saw the cell phones raised, recording her meltdown. She saw the disgust on the faces of the socialites she had tried so hard to impress. Panic, primal and desperate, washed over her features. She needed an escape. She needed a narrative shift. "It is fake," Bianca screeched, pointing a trembling finger at the blank screen behind me. She spun around to face the crowd, her voice rising to a hysterical pitch. "Do you hear me? It is all fake, that video. It is AI. It is a deep fake. Carmen works for a tech media giant. She has access to all those programs." She laughed, a manic, jagged sound that grated on the ears. "You act like you do not know technology can do anything now. She created that video to frame me. She put my face on an actor. She synthesized my voice. It is a setup because she is jealous that Daddy loves me more." She grabbed my father's arm, shaking him violently. "Daddy, listen to me. You know me. I would never say those things, 'I love you.' Carmen made it up. She is trying to destroy us. Tell them, it is a lie." My father looked down at her. His eyes were glazed, swimming in a sea of confusion. He wanted to believe her. I could see the desperate hope kindling in his chest. It was easier to believe that his eldest daughter was a villainous tech wizard than to accept that his youngest daughter was a sociopath. "Carmen," my father whispered, looking at me with pleading eyes. Is it true? Is this a trick?" I did not answer him. I did not have to. Alexander stood up from his chair. The movement was slow, deliberate, and commanded absolute attention. He buttoned his suit jacket with a sharp snap. He did not look at Bianca. He did not look at my father. He looked toward the side entrance of the stage. "Mr. Thorne," Alexander said. His voice was not loud, but it cut through Bianca's hysterics like a guillotine blade. "If you would be so kind." The side door opened, and a man walked onto the stage. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Arthur Thorne was the head legal counsel for the Sterling Family Trust. He was a man of 70, with a face carved from granite and eyes that had seen every form of human greed and stupidity imaginable. He was carrying a thick leather briefcase. He walked with the heavy, inevitable tread of the Grim Reaper. Bianca stopped screaming. She stared at the lawyer, and for the first time, genuine fear replaced her bravado. She knew who Arthur Thorne was. Everyone in Chicago knew who Arthur Thorne was. He did not deal in AI. He did not deal in deepfakes. He dealt in paper trails. "Mr. Thorne stopped in front of my father. He did not offer a handshake. He placed the briefcase on the head table, right next to my untouched wedding cake, and snapped the latches open. Click, click. The sound was deafening in the silence. "Mr. Solano." "Mr.," Thorne said. His voice was dry, devoid of emotion. "My client, Mr. Sterling, asked me to conduct a forensic audit of the Solano family finances as part of the standard prenuptial due diligence. However, given the disturbing nature of the video we just witnessed, Mr. Sterling instructed me to accelerate the release of my findings." He reached into the briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents. They were thick, stapled, and flagged with red sticky notes. "These, Mr." Thorne said, handing the stack to my father, "are the bank statements for your law firm's client escrow accounts for the past 36 months. My father took the papers. His hands were shaking so badly the pages rattled. "Escrow. What? Why?" "You will notice," Mr. Thorne continued, adjusting his spectacles, "a series of recurring wire transfers to a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands under the name Blue Horizon Ventures. These transfers occur on the third Friday of every month." "I do not know any Blue Horizon," my father stammered, flipping through the pages. "This must be a mistake. My bookkeeper handles—" "Your bookkeeper," Mr. Thorne interrupted, "was fired 2 years ago by your daughter, Bianca, who volunteered to modernize your accounting system. Is that correct?" My father froze. He looked at Bianca. She was backing away, shaking her head. "No," she whispered. "Daddy, do not listen to him." "The total amount embezzled from your firm's operating and escrow accounts over the last 3 years," Mr. Thorne stated, reading from his own file, "is $1,450,000. The crowd gasped. 1.4 million. That was not just spending money. That was theft. That was disbarment. That was prison time. "That is impossible," my father whispered, his face turning the color of ash. "I would have known. The notifications." "The notifications were rerouted to a private server," Mr. Thorne said. He reached into the briefcase again. "But if the paper trail is insufficient, perhaps you will recognize the voice authorizing the transfers." He pulled out a small digital recorder. He held it up to the microphone on the podium. He pressed play. A voice filled the room. It was not Bianca's normal, high-pitched voice. It was lower, throatier, a terrifyingly accurate impression of a middle-aged woman. "Yes, this is Linda, Mr. Solano's executive assistant. He is in court right now and cannot come to the phone, but he needs this wire approved immediately for the settlement. I have his digital key. The code is Alpha 9 Victor 7. Yes, expedite it. He is very angry about the delay." Then, the recording clicked. There was a pause, and then a second clip played. This one was a voicemail, clearly left by accident when the phone failed to hang up properly. It was Bianca's voice, her real voice. "God, these bankers are so stupid. I could buy a Porsche and put it on the office supplies tab, and they would not blink. Daddy is going to be working until he is 90 to pay this off. Oops." And then, a giggle, that same cruel giggle from the yacht video. Mr. Thorne clicked the recorder off. "The metadata confirms these calls originated from Bianca Solano's personal cell phone." "Mr. Thorne said. He closed the briefcase. "The prosecution rests." My father stood there, holding the evidence of his own destruction. The silence that followed was heavy, crushing. It was the sound of a man's entire reality imploding. He looked at the bank statements. He looked at the recorder. He realized, with a clarity that must have felt like a physical blow, that the PR crisis Bianca had claimed earlier was likely just a frantic attempt to cover a shortfall before an audit exposed her. He realized that the hospitalization was a lie. He realized that the love he thought he was buying was just a distraction while she picked his pockets. He had lost everything. His reputation was gone. No one would hire a lawyer who let his daughter steal client funds. His money was gone. And he had publicly disowned the only daughter who had ever actually loved him, in favor of the one who had cannibalized him. Slowly, painfully, my father turned to look at Bianca. She was cornered. She was trapped against the edge of the stage, her red dress looking like a stain against the white floor. She saw the look in his eyes, and she snarled. "So what?" Bianca screamed, abandoning the denial. "So what if I took it? You owe me. You owe me for being your little doll. You owe me for listening to your boring stories. You have plenty of money. Why are you so stingy?" "Stingy," my father whispered. His voice was unrecognizable. "I gave you everything. I sold your mother's jewelry. I mortgaged the house. I defended you when you were wrong. I abandoned Carmen." "Because Carmen is boring," Bianca yelled, stepping forward. Her face twisted into a mask of pure entitlement. Carmen is a worker bee. I am a star. I deserve the money. I deserve the yacht. You should be happy I let you pay for it. You old fool. She reached out to grab the papers from his hand. Give me those. You are not going to the police. I will tell them you authorized it. I will tell them you are senile. Something in my father broke. It was not a snap. It was an explosion. He dropped the papers. His hand flew up, not with the hesitant, clumsy motion he had used on Julian, but with the full, terrifying force of a man who has nothing left to lose. Crack. The sound of the slap echoed through the ballroom like a gunshot. It was louder than the music, louder than the gasps. It connected squarely with Bianca's cheek. The force of the blow spun her around. She lost her balance on her 6-inch heels and crashed to the floor, a heap of red satin and tangled limbs. The room froze. Violence at a wedding was taboo, but this felt less like assault and more like a delayed act of karma. My father stood over her, his chest heaving, his hands suspended in the air, vibrating with the aftershock of the impact. He stared at his palm as if it belonged to a stranger. Bianca lay on the floor for a second, stunned. Then she touched her cheek. She looked at the blood on her lip. And then she screamed. "You hit me!" she shrieked, scrambling backward like a crab. "He hit me. Assault. Arrest him. Someone call the police. Look at what he did to me." She looked at the crowd, expecting sympathy. She found none. 300 faces looked back at her with stone-cold indifference. Even her own friends, if she had any in the room, did not move. "Get her out of here," Alexander said. He did not shout. He simply gave a nod to Marcus and the security team. "With pleasure, sir," Marcus said. 2 large security guards stepped onto the stage. They did not handle her gently. They grabbed Bianca by her upper arms, hoisting her up as if she were an unruly child. "Get your hands off me!" Bianca screamed, kicking and thrashing. Her shoes fell off. Her dress ripped at the hem. "I am Bianca Solano. I am the victim here, Daddy. Make them stop, Daddy." But Daddy did not move. He just watched. As they dragged her down the stairs and toward the exit, Bianca realized it was truly over. Her mask fell away completely, revealing the rabid animal underneath. "I hate you all," she screamed, twisting her neck to look back at us, her eyes bulging. "I hope you die. I hope you all burn. You are nothing without me. Nothing." Her curses faded as the double doors swung shut behind her, cutting off her voice. The silence returned, but this time, it was different. It was the silence of a battlefield after the cannon fire had ceased. The guests were motionless. The waiters stood frozen with trays of champagne. My father was the only thing moving. He looked at the closed doors. Then he looked at his hand. Then he looked at the empty space where his dignity used to be. Slowly, he turned around. He looked at the painting of the core family lying broken on the floor. And then he looked at me. I was standing next to Alexander, my hand resting on his arm. I felt calm. I felt detached. I felt like I was watching a play I had already read the script for. My father took a step toward me, then another. He looked old. He looked like he had aged 20 years in 20 minutes. His shoulders were slumped, his face ravaged by tears and shock. "Carmen," he croaked. He walked until he was 3 feet away from me. And then, Matteo Solano, the proud lawyer, the man who cared more about appearances than his own soul, did the unthinkable. He bent his knees. He sank down, first one knee, then the other. He collapsed onto the floor of the ballroom, heedless of his ruined suit, heedless of the 300 witnesses. He bowed his head. His shoulders shook with racking sobs. "I am sorry," he wept. The sound was guttural, ugly. "I am so sorry, Carmen, my baby. I didn't know." He reached out, his trembling hand trying to grasp the hem of my dress. I stepped back, pulling the white silk out of his reach. "I was fooled," he blubbered, looking up at me, his face wet with tears and snot. She manipulated me. She lied to me. I was blind. Carmen, I was so blind." He wiped his eyes, trying to compose himself, trying to find some remnant of the fatherly authority he had abdicated years ago. "But you," he said, his voice desperate, "you are good. You are my good girl. You are the only one I have left. You are the pride of the Solano name. You are my legacy. Carmen, please, forgive your old father. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but we can fix it. We are family." He looked at me with expectation. He expected the scene to end with reconciliation. He expected the weeping daughter to fall into his arms. He expected the good girl to do what she always did, clean up the mess. I looked down at him. I remembered the years of neglect. I remembered the graduation he missed. I remembered the text message he sent me 3 hours ago. I remembered him laughing on the yacht while I was walking down the aisle. And I felt nothing. I searched my heart for anger. It was gone. I searched for hate. It wasn't there. There was only a vast, cool emptiness. It was the feeling of looking at a stranger, a sad, pathetic stranger who had mistaken me for someone who cared. He wasn't a monster. Monsters are scary. He was just a small, weak man who had spent his life chasing shiny things and was shocked to find they were made of foil. "Stand up, Mateo," I said. I did not call him Dad. He flinched at the use of his first name. "Carmen, please." "Stand up," I repeated. My voice was devoid of warmth. "You are making a scene, and you are ruining the carpet." I looked at Alexander. I think my father is ready to leave now. My father stayed on his knees, staring up at me, waiting for a pardon that was never coming. In his eyes, I saw the terrifying realization that he was not just broke, and not just humiliated. He was irrelevant, and that, for a man like him, was a fate far worse than death. The sound of my father weeping on the floor of the Drake Hotel ballroom was a sound I had never heard before. Throughout my life, Mateo Solano had been a man of volume, loud laughs, loud commands, loud lectures. But this was different. This was the wet, ragged sound of a man who had been stripped down to his wires and found them rusting. He remained on his knees, his hands reaching out toward me, grasping at the air just inches from the hem of my gown. He looked like a pilgrim begging a saint for a miracle, but I was not a saint, and I was certainly done performing miracles. I did not reach down to help him. I did not offer a tissue. I did not bend my knees to meet him on his level. Instead, I took a slow, deliberate step backward. The movement was small, but the chasm it created was infinite. My father's hands fell to his sides, hitting his thighs with a pathetic slap. He looked up at me, his eyes red and swollen, searching for the daughter who had always been the fixer. He was looking for Carmen the doormat, Carmen the peacekeeper. She was not there. I felt a warm presence on my right shoulder. Alexander had stepped in closer, his body radiating a heat that shielded me from the chill of the room. On my left, Uncle Julian moved in, his presence silent and sturdy as an oak tree. We stood there, a united front, a wall of iron against the man who was crumbling on the parquet floor. "Carmen," my father choked out, his voice cracking. "Please, I am old. I am alone. Do not do this. Do not look at me like that." "Like what?" I asked. My voice was trembling, not with fear, but with the sheer intensity of the truth that was clawing its way up my throat. "Like I am a stranger," he whispered. I took a deep breath. The air in the ballroom tasted different now. It no longer smelled of fear and stale perfume. It tasted like ozone, the clean, sharp scent of the air after a violent storm has passed. "You are a stranger," I said. "You have been a stranger to me for 26 years. I just didn't want to admit it." I looked down at him, and for the first time, I saw him clearly. I didn't see the powerful lawyer. I didn't see the provider. I saw a man who was hollowed out by his own vanity. "You said you loved me," I said, my voice gaining strength, ringing clear in the silent room. "You just told me I am your legacy, but you do not love me. Dad, you never did." He opened his mouth to protest, to offer the same tired platitudes about blood and duty, but I cut him off. "And you do not love Bianca either." I continued. the realization hitting me with the force of a revelation. You never loved her. You enabled her. You spoiled her. You turned her into a monster because her neediness made you feel important. You loved her dependency. You loved being her hero. And you hated my independence because it made you feel unnecessary. The guests were watching us, transfixed. This was not a scene from a soap opera anymore. This was a funeral. We were burying a relationship that had been dead on arrival. You only love your ego, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that carried more weight than a scream. You only love the reflection of yourself you see in other people's eyes. And right now you hate what you see in mine. Because I am not reflecting a hero. I am reflecting on a coward. My father flinched. He slumped forward, his forehead nearly touching the floor. I have nothing, he sobbed. She took the money. She took the reputation. If I lose you, I have nothing. You lost me a long time ago, I said. You lost me when you missed my graduation. You lost me when you sold Mom's pin. You lost me tonight when you chose a yacht party over walking me down the aisle. The only difference is that tonight, I am finally signing the death certificate. I looked at Alexander. I saw the fierce pride burning in his eyes. I looked at Julian. I saw the peace of a man who knew justice had finally been served. I am not your retirement plan. Dad, I said. I am not your emotional rehabilitation center, and I am certainly not your daughter anymore. I turned to the side, addressing the room at large, but my words were meant for the man on the floor. I, Carmen Solano, formally renounce any claim to the Solano estate, or what is left of it, I announced. I want nothing, not a penny, not a property, not a memory. You can keep the ashes of the empire you let Bianca burn down. My father looked up, panic flaring in his eyes. Carmen, no, you are the heir. You have to take over. You have to fix the firm. The firm is dead, I said coldly, and so is my obligation to it. I turned back to Alexander. I choose you, I said softly, touching his lapel. I choose this family, the one that shows up. Alexander took my hand and brought it to his lips. We choose you, he replied. I looked at Marcus, the head of security, who was waiting patiently by the stage. Mr. Marcus, I said. Yes, Mrs. Sterling, Marcus replied instantly. The name sent a shiver of delight down my spine. Mrs. Sterling. Please escort Mr. Solano to the exit, I ordered. Do not drag him. Do not hurt him. Just remove him. Understood, Marcus said. He stepped forward. He did not grab my father roughly as he had with Bianca. He simply reached down, took my father by the arm, and hoisted him to his feet. My father wobbled. He looked disoriented, swaying in his ruined suit. He looked at me one last time. His eyes were wide, wet, and filled with a terrifying realization. He wasn't being punished with anger. He was being punished with indifference. Carmen, he whispered, I am your dad. Goodbye, Mateo, I said. I turned my back. I heard the shuffle of feet. I heard the low murmur of Marcus giving instructions. I heard the heavy footsteps retreating down the aisle. I did not turn around. I stared at the white hydrangeas on the head table. I focused on the flame of the candle flickering in the crystal votive. I willed myself to be stone. The doors at the back of the room opened. Then, they clicked shut. Click. It was the softest sound in the world, but to me, it sounded like a prison door opening to release a lifer. He was gone. The energy in the room shifted instantly. The oppressive weight that had hung over the wedding for hours evaporated. The air felt lighter. The colors seemed brighter. But the room was still silent. The guests were unsure. They were waiting for a cue. Was it over? Was the wedding ruined? Should they leave? I grabbed the microphone from the table. My hand was steady. My heart was beating a slow, strong rhythm. I turned to face the 300 guests, the elite, the judges, the senators, the socialites. They were looking at me with a mixture of awe and fear. I smiled. It wasn't a fake smile. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated relief. Ladies and gentlemen, I said,
my voice warm and welcoming. "I would like to offer my sincerest apologies for the interruption. We had some uninvited pests that needed to be exterminated." A ripple of nervous laughter went through the crowd. "However," I continued, "I believe the air has been cleared, and I believe we have a celebration to attend to." I raised my glass of champagne, which Alexander had silently placed in my hand. "They say that a wedding is about two families coming together," I said. "But sometimes it is about creating a new one from the ashes of the old. Tonight, I did not lose a family. I found one." I looked at Alexander. I looked at Julian. I looked at Elena Sterling in the front row, who was raising her glass to me with a nod of profound respect. "So please," I said, "eat, drink, and for the love of God, someone turn the music back on. The real party starts now." "Here, here," Uncle Julian shouted, raising his glass high.
"To the bride and groom," someone yelled from the back.
"To Carmen," another voice shouted.
The room erupted. The applause was thunderous, far louder and more genuine than the polite clapping at the ceremony. The band kicked in immediately, launching into a lively, upbeat jazz number that chased away the lingering shadows of the Solano drama. Waiters surged forward, pouring wine, serving food. The hum of conversation returned, but it wasn't gossipy anymore. It was celebratory. "You were incredible," Alexander whispered, pulling me into his arms. "I have never seen anything like that. You are terrifying, and I am obsessed with you." "I learned from the best," I teased, leaning my head against his shoulder. "I am Sterling now. We don't take prisoners." "Come on," he said, taking my hand. "I think we missed our first dance." He led me to the center of the dance floor. The crowd parted for us, forming a circle of smiling faces. There was no judgment in their eyes anymore, only admiration. I had walked through fire and come out unburnt. The band slowed the tempo. The lead singer stepped up to the mic. The opening notes of "At Last" by Etta James floated through the air. Alexander wrapped his arm around my waist. I placed my hand on his shoulder. We began to sway. I rested my head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. I closed my eyes. For the first time all day, perhaps, for the first time in my life, I felt completely safe. I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't waiting for a crisis. I wasn't waiting to be needed. I was just loved. "Wait," I said, pulling back slightly. "I forgot something." "What?" Alexander asked. "The bouquet," I said. I looked at the bundle of white calla lilies I had left on the table. I walked over and picked them up. Traditionally, the bouquet toss is for the single ladies, a superstition about who will be married next. But as I held the flowers, I realized they meant something else to me. They represented the expectations I had carried, the white perfection I had tried to maintain, the silence I had kept. I walked to the edge of the stage. A group of women gathered, laughing and jostling for position. But I didn't turn my back to throw it over my shoulder. I looked up at the high, vaulted ceiling of the ballroom. I looked at the open balcony doors where the night air of Chicago was drifting in. "This isn't for a husband," I whispered to myself. "This is for freedom." I wound up my arm and threw the bouquet, not toward the women, but up, high, hard, and fast toward the balcony. The white flowers sailed through the air, spinning against the light of the chandeliers. They soared over the heads of the guests, over the railing, and out into the dark, starry night above Lake Michigan. Gone. I watched them disappear into the wind. "Oops," I laughed, turning back to Alexander. "I think I missed it." Alexander grinned. "I think your aim was perfect." He pulled me back into his arms. We resumed our dance. The world narrowed down to just the two of us. The lights blurred into streaks of gold. The music swelled. I thought about my father, probably sitting in the back of a taxi right now, realizing that his phone had stopped ringing. I thought about Bianca, screaming in the parking lot, realizing that her credit cards were about to be declined. And then, I let them go. I let them drift away like the flowers in the wind. I looked up at my husband. I looked at the sapphire pin in the mirror's reflection.
shining in my dark hair. I looked at Uncle Julian, who was clinking glasses with Elena Sterling, laughing at a joke. My past was a ruin, but my future was just beginning, and it was going to be magnificent. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It was a roller coaster of emotion, and I hope you enjoyed seeing Carmen finally get the justice she deserved. If you have ever had to deal with toxic family members or stand up for yourself when it was hard, I would love to hear your story. Please comment below and let me know where you are listening from. I love reading through the comments and seeing our community grow from all over the world. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to subscribe to the Family Revenge Stories channel. Hit that like button to help us out, and press the hype button so more people can hear these stories of justice and resilience. See you in the next one.